I first started producing music, if we could call it that, when I was 15. I was using Audacity to record acoustic guitar covers of songs that my teenage girlfriend, I was also a teenager, I have to add, that we liked and that were special to us. You know, these included such hits as Sexy Bitch by Akon and David Guetta, as well as all sorts of songs from cool movies that we liked. Anyways, in those days, I gave zero fucks about how good either my voice sounded, how tuned my guitar was, or definitely didn't give a fuck about how clear the recording was. Frankly, I didn't even know that you could make things sound better than they sounded. I was using not even an external microphone, but just the built-in microphone on my mother's low-priced Dell work laptop. In those days, I would literally just make music because I had this emotional calling to want to express something that meant something to us. And I would share this with my girlfriend and she would love it, and she would definitely never give me any mix notes. She wouldn't be like, oh, it's nice, but got a little bit too much 500 hertz in there. She would just love it, you know. She would be appreciative of the fact that I had gone out of my way to create a thing that I didn't need to. I think that's one of the beautiful things about art, particularly when we start any kind of creative endeavor. It begins with this rather naive and authentic sense of curiosity and just this desire to discover and to try things out. I'm going to give you a pretty non-chronological, poorly tied together timeline of my music career, of how I've now got to becoming an artist with 115 tracks out and 70 million streams and being featured in publications like Vogue and Mixmag and DJ Mag. And would you have it? You know, would you know that frankly it wasn't always like that? You know, it's actually been a bit of a struggle to get to where I am today. Not to say that it's not still a struggle in many ways, but I want to wheel it back a little bit from somewhere in between being that teenage boy recording Akon songs on his mother's work laptop to now being who and where I am today. In around 2012, 2013, I had been producing for maybe 2 or 3 years, exploring what at the time was called post-dubstep in the UK culture. This was people like Disclosure in the early days, and Bondax, and XXXY, and XXYYXX. For some reason, there was a lot of X's and Y's in those days. And I then went to music university, the Academy of Contemporary Music in Guildford in England, because frankly I didn't really want to go and do any more studies, and I thought if I was going to get a degree I should do it in something that I was okay with sitting around doing all day, which was fucking around on Ableton. But long story short, I started university with a real amount of curiosity and drive to just make music. And I was making a lot of it. There was very little holding me back from feeling a certain way and sitting down in Ableton and just basically shitting out a track that, with no real need to appear anything other than it had appeared as, just sharing it with the world. And I was really prolific. I was very consistent. I was making a lot of music, at least putting out one track every month, but usually like every 2 weeks. And I had this sense of the fact that there was just a thing that needed to be shared. I would sit down, I would work on a track, and I would finish it, mix it and master it in like 5 minutes, because I didn't really even at that point know how much more I should know about mixing. And at the moment that I'd finished it, I'd just literally upload it on SoundCloud straight away with some silly caption. And I developed a pretty huge following quite quickly on. And I think this was largely because of the consistency, but also the authenticity with which I shared my art. People really resonated with what clearly I felt needed to be expressed through sound, through my specific perspective of life and creativity. And there was very little for me to doubt about either what I was doing or the way that people were perceiving it and receiving it. But I got a pretty decent amount of success early on, which meant that I was playing shows and I was being asked to do official remixes for big artists like Wiz Khalifa and Zoo and all of these kind of things. They, you know, were clear signs of the fact that what I was doing was resonating not just with people, but with the industry. Dun, 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 dun. Around this time as well, I started being asked to come to America, to play at places like South by Southwest, to showcase my burgeoning skills as an artist. I started going to meetings with the head of Sony and all of these things that in theory were very exciting stepping stones from where I was to where I perhaps was at least told I wanted to go. But the problem with all of these things was I then started feeling as though there were hoops to jump through. There were things that I needed to do in order to be what I was told that I needed to be so that I could get, again, what I was told that I wanted. It stopped being just an immediate expression of how do I feel, there's a song, have it, connecting directly with fans, and more at that point trying to like curate and slightly manicure my expression as an artist because of the fact that now the stakes were higher. So I had these first 2-ish years as Tash when I was at university, and I'm gonna gloss over a bunch of the other aspects of it. I mean, this is definitely worth being a whole other story, just the 2012-2013 UK house scene, which for any of you guys were aware, and in the UK during 2012 and 2013, truly was a golden era. I imagine people in 200 years from now will look back on the Guildford scene of 2012, of how all of these producers were flipping the same old brandy sample for 2 years. But around that period, I was just releasing so much music, connecting with so many people, playing so many shows. And after that, I moved to Barcelona. I moved back to Spain, where I grew up, but I moved to Barcelona this time with a couple of other friends. And no longer was I surrounded by this community of... There was probably like 20, 30 of us boys, lads, we were smoking a lot of weed and going and playing all these house shows with each other and just really helping create this feeling of, I suppose in some ways, healthy competition. Like we're all trying to outdo each other, but at the same time inspire and motivate each other, which again, I think is a real selling point of community in general, is that real feeling of the fact that like, I need to fucking finish a song now because fucking Nina's done it and Rory's just finished 2 tracks. But beside the point, I then moved to Barcelona and I was basically living alone, isolated as an artist. And to add on to this isolation I had as an artist, there was all these now carrots dangling above me, like on sticks about, okay, well, if you want to release on Life and Death, you're going to have to go that way. And if you want to do the sort of more major label route and do an album with Virgin, well, you're going to have to do this. And at that point, I went through about 2 years of not finishing anything. And it's not that I wasn't working on music. I was working furiously. I was working from wake up to go to bed, consistently staring at my laptop, in my boxer shorts, smoking a lot of weed, mind. But I was just working consistently, making project file idea after project file idea. I made thousands, and I finished none of them. And I had a manager, I had a series of managers at the time, and I would send them these ideas, and maybe there'd be a 1-second idea. And I'm not saying these ideas were bad. A lot of these were very good ideas, but I would send it to them and they would say, great Lex, brilliant, now finish it and we can release it. But I couldn't. I was paralyzed. I would then go, okay, well, how do I finish this? And I would go on YouTube and I would search for like top 10 tips for finishing house tracks, completely forgetting that I'd already put out like 20, 30 songs already to great success that people had loved in exactly as ignorant of a fashion as I had done before. But I suddenly felt that there was all of this information that I did not have that I would need to have in order to do what I wanted to do. Just completely removing myself from the fact that there was a wisdom, a knowledge that I had from the get-go, without anybody telling me what I needed to do, that was just guided by intuition. Anyways, these 2 years went on quite painfully in what felt like a very long time, until something happened, and I don't really remember what it is. There's some sort of like blurry period in here where eventually, little old me, I discover the fact that, oh, okay, well, you just need to do this. Like I adjusted myself and made a little bit of headway, and I started finishing a couple of tracks. I think I had a new goal. I wanted to be involved with this music festival, Desert Hearts, in the deserts of California, and that gave me a sort of kick up the arse, and I released an EP with them, and I did a remix, and I played the festival, and all of a sudden I was excited again. Also, I had a new range or a new frame of reference of what dance music was or what I wanted to make. But over time, I started to then fall back into this situation of being paralyzed by seeking knowledge. And that's really where I want to go today in this ramble, is that so many of us get fucking stuck in the search for knowledge, as if we don't yet have what we need to create good art, and that we don't yet know what we know in order to finish the songs that we've created from a place of curiosity and from authentic expression. And so I spent multiple years diving back in and out of like just doubting myself, thinking that regardless of all of the success that I had had, that I still wasn't good enough, that I still needed to know more about mixing, and that other people knew more about mixing than I did, and frankly they would probably always know more than I, because I'm just not meant to be that way, and blah 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 blah. So it's funny because it wasn't really until I started my label, Glitter Cowboy, that I then reconnected with that original part of myself when I started in those early 2012, 2013 days where I was just making songs and releasing them. And in those days, I wasn't even putting out those first tracks on Spotify, or I was literally, the scene was on SoundCloud, and if the YouTube channels like Majestic Casual and The Sound You Needed liked them, they would then post them on YouTube. So there was sort of a SoundCloud and a YouTube mafia going on here. But then I went through these periods, over the next few years, as I said, where I wasn't finished anything. And obviously a lot of this came down to the fact that I felt like I needed to tailor myself to labels, these music labels that, they would never release me just as the way as I was, or also they would give feedback and they would say, oh, well, we like this, but you need to change that, and blah, 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 blah. And how fucking dare you tell me what to change about my art? I'm not going to finish anything out of protest. But I started my label, Glitter Cowboy, I think really out of pure suggestion from my mother, who, bless her heart, had probably got fed up of me complaining about how the music industry wanted to change me. So she probably said something along the lines of, for fuck's sake, start your own label. And I was like, what are you talking about? People don't just start their own label. And she was very right. It was a really good idea. A lot of the success I have today comes from the fact that I started my own label, Glitter Cowboy. Because at that point, I could then finish a song, and as soon as I'd finished that song, I could ship it. I could get that shit ready. And it was sort of just an evolution of my early SoundCloud days, where no longer did I have to appeal to or appease anyone else. I got to just express my ideas, whatever it is that I wanted to share musically, I could do that. And I had like a home where not just I could share the music, but I could actually sell and earn money from this music in a way that I wasn't when I was just doing the SoundCloud days. I made a lot of music once I started Glitter Cowboy, because it meant that at that point I had a goal and I knew that my music had an outlet. So if any of you guys are in any way like, find an avenue for your music, make it easy so that the actual release of it is easy, and you're going to finish a hell of a lot more of it knowing that there is actually somewhere to put that music. But again, bit of a blurry situation. I know that I then dipped back out of this feeling of connection with my music, and it wasn't until actually that I lost my dad. That was, I'm sure a bunch of you guys have seen the video on this YouTube channel called Everyone You Love Will Die. If you haven't, check it out. It's an essay I wrote about losing my father. But that really was such a monumental moment in waking me up again, re-waking me, who knows. But just snapping me out of the career game that I had found myself into, and just reminding me of just the sort of transient beauty and pain of being a human being. And around the time of losing my father, one of my good collaborators and good friends, Lonely Boy, Joshua Heath, he's a bassist, he's played bass for years. He had just been to a camp, a music camp in Nashville, or near Nashville, Tennessee, with a legendary bassist who I had never heard of up until that point, called Victor Wooten. If you haven't heard of him, check him out. He's an absolute legend. His approach to teaching and understanding music, mind-blowing. But anyways, I had heard about this camp from my friend Josh, and he'd gone to this camp called Bass Nature. And the whole point of the way Victor's approach to teaching is that it's not just music. He teaches you about music and nature, because he says they go side by side. It's as much about the music as it is the experience of being in the forest where he does these camps. And I thought it was kind of interesting. And Josh told me as well, they also do guitar nature and drum nature and whatever, singing nature. And they also do a thing called Spirit of Music. Okay, so let's put a page, like a leaf in that page. I then, out of the blue, had to fly back a few days later to my dying father, where I spent 9 days with him beside his deathbed. I don't know why they call it a deathbed. Nobody wants a deathbed. But anyways, on one of the perhaps middle days of his still pretty lucid experience, I was telling him about this camp. And he was very interested, and when we were looking on the phone and I was showing him pictures, and this Spirit of Music camp seemed particularly interesting. And I don't remember the absolute tagline, but it was something about a camp dedicated to talking about and teaching and exploring the intangible parts of music. And that to me sounded very interesting. As somebody who likes conspiracy theories and hidden truths and little known facts, like the idea of going to a camp about the things we can't talk about, very cool. And I think my dad said something like, you should go to this. And after he died, my mother said that he had given me the money to go to this camp. So I went to this camp about a month or two after he died, and it was still very raw, the feeling of having lost him. But I went to this camp about music, and there was a lot of nature. There was a lot of barefoot walks through the forest and meditation and all of just this wonderful, not really woo-woo bullshit kind of like yoga manifestation crap, like very real grounded appreciation of the conscious mind, and or sort of disconnecting from the buzz of the world to connect with the real essence of music, that spirit, that divine energy that actually underpins what we call music today. And, you know, I've talked about it as well on this channel before, that I don't think of music as this business, this industry. Oh, music, oh, like Taylor Swift and Tale of Us. And I think of music as this energy that we have built an industry on top of. Music is this all-knowing, all-powerful thing that existed long before we existed, and definitely existed long before we stood there to say music. It was just a thing, the way that the birds sang, the way that the wind lapped on the leaves of a tree. It's music. Suffice to say, I went to this camp, this Spirit of Music camp, and for the first time ever, I surrounded myself with a community of people, and not just the people in the community, but Victor and the guests that he had teaching at this camp, who saw music in the same way that I had been connecting with it before I started to doubt myself. And at this camp, there was people from all different levels, like advanced players with beginners, and everybody was just encouraged to speak through their music. It wasn't a case of like, okay, only advanced players are playing with advanced players. It was a real collaborative experience of where people learn from people who, in theory, to most people would say, oh, you know a lot less than me. But those people sometimes know a lot. So to reconnect with this just like real wisdom of the beginner, of the beginner's mind, was really important. And it shaped the way that I then went on in life, understanding and creating music since then. And I have had a far more emotional and irrational and intuitive approach to making music since that camp. Anyways, flash forward a few more years, I then put out a bunch of music and had a great experience. And then this thing, if you remember, about 4 years ago, a small group of powerful and wealthy people got together with the express desire to perhaps imprison not just the physical bodies, but the minds of the mass population. And they did something which none of us could have expected would have been quite so well orchestrated. Blah, 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 blah. It meant a bunch of us were stuck in places. And the place that I was stuck at was my ex-girlfriend's house out in the countryside in the UK. And at that point, I was getting the majority of my income, if not almost all of it, was coming through touring, through gigs. And I was being paid a few thousand a show, so to suddenly have no shows, it was, where am I going to be getting my money from? And that's not to say that it's the only reason I started Tash Teachers, but I did go, okay, well, how can I explore my expertise? How can I explore what I know in a way that I could potentially monetize and I could utilize for the benefit of others as well? And in those early days, I didn't necessarily go, okay, I'm going to start a paid service straight away, but I was like, I need to start a YouTube channel. And so I dragged a desk out to the middle of the forest, and I dragged a very long extension lead out there and plugged in my speakers and my camera and my laptop, and I set out trying to create content. Video content that would not just teach people how to use Ableton or Bitwig, because I thought there was plenty of that, but teach Ableton and Bitwig in a way that gave acknowledgement to the magic of music, that understood primarily that music is a magic, is a divine energy that we are creating and communing and collaborating with through these tools, Ableton, Bitwig. And I think a lot of people really, if not knowing necessarily literally that that's what I was trying to teach, a lot of people connected with this. They connected with my education in the same way that a lot of people first connected with my music. That I was showing up and I was just authentically expressing what I felt. And a lot of the knowledge, or a lot of the things, the opinions that I was sharing in those early videos, particularly the How to Be a Happier Artist series, a lot of those things were things that I had learned at the Victor Wooten camp. They were things that I had learned along the way through meeting people off of the sort of side quest of the Victor Wooten camp. After that point, I started meeting more and more musicians who seemed to understand that there was something special going on, that there was something more to music than just a music industry. And That has been my driving force ever since. And I never intended to become a teacher. I never intended to become a coach. And frankly, I hate the term coach. But to describe specifically what I have been doing as Tash Teaches, as the Tash Teaches coaching brand, is it's less about teaching people things and more about reconnecting my students, reconnecting people who I'm coming across, just reconnecting them with that sense of confidence that they had in themselves when they first started. And I just see it in so many people, the journey that I went on of getting stuck in the technical, getting stuck in the perfectionism and feeling unworthy because I was not making what felt perfectly manicured music. And I just have had such an immense amount of joy in helping the people that I've worked with, in seeing the magic and the wonder and the power that they have as artists. And yeah, I just really want to, if you're still watching this video at this point, remind you that at whatever stage you are at on your journey, whatever doubts, whatever fears, whatever scars that you have experienced so far, like, you know more than you give yourself credit. And there are things that you know that nobody else will ever know because you can't even share them in words. The only way that you can share the wisdom that you have is through making your music, making your art and sharing that art with the world. And people will feel it. People will understand you through the sounds that you choose to combine together. But the only awful, awful tragedy here is when we get caught up not finishing and not sharing our music because we are so caught in this tutorial hell and perfectionism loop. So I do just want to make a little plug here. If you've got this far in this call, in this video, I think that, you may get an immense amount of benefit out of joining my new community, Heart of Sound. And yes, it is a music production community where I do workshops and I teach about Bitwig and Ableton, but please understand that I'm not here to just teach you what other tutorials can teach you. Because if that were the case, I wouldn't even try. Like, I'm not here to necessarily just give technical advice because I don't think that that's what you need. But what I am here to do is to show you and to present to you what it feels like to believe in yourself, what it feels like to create from a sense of inner authority, of trusting in the fact that your authentic voice and your expression is something that is worthy and in many ways that the world needs. And so if you would like to try out my new community, Heart of Sound, I've just started a 7-day free trial, which means that you can 100% risk-free come and join us, attend 2 calls, because there's 2 calls every week, 3 on certain weeks. On Mondays, we do alternating workshops versus then support sessions, in which I will help you with whatever problem it is that you're facing, whether it is a technical issue or you just want to come and talk about the more spiritual aspects of music, the things that are holding you back. And then every Friday, we do a Feedback Friday where myself and the community, we share music with each other and we provide heart-centered feedback and advice on how the music made us feel and perhaps how this music could be improved. Every other, one Wednesday a month as well, we also do an accountability meetup call where we share our goals and our aspirations and what it is that we are going to be working on for the next month so that we can hold each other accountable, so that we can witness each other as humble human beings trying to do better. As well as then we also have a monthly special guest, and I'm not going to tell you who we have in January, but let's just say that I am inviting some of the best and brightest minds and most creative hearts into this community once a month to share their wisdom with us. But enough about Heart of Sound. Find it in the link down below. It's school.com/music. Come and try it out. No risk to you. 7-day free trial. We would love to meet you. We'd love to help you on your journey. And ultimately, I would love to give you the gift of freedom that I was given by Victor Wooten. So on that note, happy Friday and happy creating.